What up, nerds? My name is Leslie Smith. Welcome to the Nerdy Narrative, a channel where I like to talk about all sorts of fun bookish related things in science fiction, fantasy, horror, and manga genres. On today's episode of fun, I am going to do a really cute tag that I saw a few weeks ago that was created by my friend Nina from the channel Wrestling with Disney and her friend Heather over on the Disney Housewife. I'm going to have both of their channels linked below so you can check out their original tag videos. Of course, you probably know the one word in both of their channels that had me watching them, and yes, it's Disney. I love watching all of their Disney content, of which there is a ton. So if you are a Disney fan, I guarantee you there is something on both of their channels that you'll love. The name of this tag is the 2020 Goodreads Challenge and Year in Review. So let's jump into these questions and see how it shakes out on what I did as far as my Goodreads challenge and just a few accomplishments I had reading-wise in my year in review. Question number 1, how many books did you read this year? According to my Goodreads, I read 139 books. That does include a lot of the manga volumes that I read, but not all of them. Somewhere around in July, I started buddy reading a ton of manga with Una from the Codex Cantina. Once we tried a couple of different series and I was absolutely smitten with manga, Una drafted up a reading plan to take me on a journey through all of the different types of manga, which will actually be continuing this year. For the most part, I read one volume of manga a day that averages between 185 to maybe a couple hundred pages. So a lot of people don't count manga. I don't care what you count, don't count. Some of it's on my Goodreads, but not all of it. For those of you that count manga, I didn't get it all in. For those of you that don't count manga, I don't know how many books I read, not including manga. Sorry. So question number 2, what was the first book you read last year? I read The Sword of Shannara by Terry Brooks. So the Shannara Chronicles were actually recommended to me by a friend of mine several years ago, like probably 20 years ago now. And I bought them at Borders when Borders was still a thing. And then I just never got around to reading them. So when Chris and I were packing up to move, I uncovered them and I was like, you know what? It's gonna be the first thing on my list after we move. So as a result, this is where I started my reading journey this past year. Let's see. So the next question, what was your most anticipated read? Everybody out there knows the answer to this one that's been around the channel, whether it's been a day, a week, a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, up into 12 months. Peace Talks by Jim Butcher. So fortunately for me, I didn't discover the Dresden Files until a couple of years ago, so I didn't have to wait as long as everybody else for this installment into the series. But once I got it, I loved it. I flew through it. It was very enjoyable. It lived up to the hype as far as my opinion goes. But we won't talk about his brother that came after him. Nope, we're gonna pretend like he does not exist. Let's see. Next question. What was the shortest book you read? That would be a novella called Revolver by Michael Patrick Hick, which was absolutely amazing. While it was the shortest book I read, it's also the very first book I ever tried on audiobook, and it was amazing. The narrator was just absolutely wonderful. The story was phenomenal. I mean, it was just a hard hitter. I'll put my review of it up in the cards for you, but wow, the message behind this story and how social media influenced what was happening in this book, oh man. And oh, the way that story played out was just fantastic. Highly recommend. And even though it's been almost a year and it was a novella, I still remember how I felt when I was listening to it. It was just that compelling of a story. Okay, next question. What was the longest book you read? I'm actually kind of shocked. I thought I read one longer than Oathbringer last year, but then again, I shouldn't be shocked because all of Brandon Sanderson books are extremely long. Wait a minute, that can't be right. I thought Rhythm of War was longer. Goodreads must have had the wrong page count for Rhythm of War. Had to have, because I remember it was longer. That's interesting. So my copy of Oathbringer actually does have more pages than Rhythm of War. I'm sorry, Goodreads, you were right. For once. Next question. What book surprised you the most? Good or bad? Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb, which is book 1 in the Live Ship Trader series by her. This surprised me for many reasons. The first book I ever read by Robin Hobb was Assassin's Apprentice. It was a buddy read with Michael Knipp on his channel with the patrons. And while Assassin's Apprentice was a beautifully written book, Robin Hobb's prose is unmatched. It just is. It just is. I mean, that's just the story of Assassin's Apprentice. It is just heart-wrenching, and the woman just broke my heart repeatedly, and when she got done ripping my heart out, she took my soul as well. And I was scared to continue. I actually did not continue that trilogy, and as part of a really fun event that I took part in December, I ended up reading Ship of Magic, and going in, I fully expected to appreciate the beauty of the prose, which I was not let down at all. What I also expected to have my heart broken, that didn't happen. The book was beautiful. The story was unique. It was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, this one's a chunker too, but it never lost my attention. Everything felt important. I didn't feel like there was any time wasted with things that didn't have any bearing on the story. There were several point of views. Normally when there are several point of views, there are some I like more than others, that I'm sad when I leave one to start another. That did not take place here. Every one had something extremely interesting and valuable to the overall story that I was excited to read. Oh my gosh, all of the different elements were amazing and just absolutely beautiful. And it just ended up being one of the last books I read in 2020, but my favorite of 2020. I mean, guys, I'm gonna be quite honest. This might be my most favorite fantasy trilogy of all time. I mean, so the next question is, what was the worst book you read? Unfortunately, the first book I read in 2020 was The Sword of Shannara. It ended up being the worst. I did try to read its follow-up in the series, which was The Elfstones of Shannara. I DNF'd it 3 times. I tried reading it, and I just got bored with it, and then I decided to try again later, got bored with it. Then I decided to try doing it on audiobook to see if the narrators would make it interesting enough to get through it, and I just didn't like it. Not even with Scott Brick reading it to me. I just didn't like it. I think maybe if I had discovered Terry Brooks earlier in junior high when I was reading Tolkien and those guys, it might have worked. But as an adult, it's not working for me. Not at all. Let's see. Next question. What book exceeded your expectations? This book exceeded my expectations in the most delightful of ways. That is The Martian by Andy Weir. So I actually discovered this book because of a readathon. And I can't remember whose readathon it was. I do remember Eric from Break Even Books was involved. I don't know if he was hosting it or co-hosting. I think he was co-hosting, and I want to say it was the Pokemon one. And I was on the team where this was our group read. That's the only reason why I picked it up. I got it off eBay secondhand, and it was in the month that I finished reading Ruin by John Gwynne, and that book absolutely broke my heart. I cried for hours after finishing that book, and I needed something to just cleanse the palate, get my mind off of it. I didn't want to read any more fantasy. I needed something completely different, so I picked up The Martian, and man, was that the best decision ever. 2 pages in, I was already cracking up. I laughed almost this entire book. It was so enjoyable. It's one that I will reread many times. This book to me is like a picture that every time you look at it, you just get a good, warm, fuzzy feeling. This is a smile in printed format. It's just an absolutely entertaining, enjoyable, quick, fun read, and I will always keep a copy on hand to reread as needed. Alright, next question. What author did you read the most of? I didn't realize this. I actually thought it was Brandon Sanderson, but when I looked at my Goodreads, it was actually Jim Butcher. So earlier in the year, I got into trying out audiobooks. One thing I learned very quickly is I get distracted if I'm listening to an audiobook. I'm not a multitasker. I am a one-track mind. I can only do one thing at a time kind of girl. And as a result, audiobooks, I'll daydream in a heartbeat. So what I then decided to try is rereads on audiobooks. And of course, the first series that came to mind was the Dresden Files because James Marsters is the narrator. So I actually started going through the Dresden Files again, but the audiobook format. And I just hadn't realized how many of them I actually listened to this year, plus the 2 that came out in printed format. So Jim Butcher wins, no big surprise there. He is one of my favorite authors. Next question. If you could recommend one book you read this year to your subscribers, what would it be? So that depends. For my fantasy subs, I would definitely have to recommend Ship of Magic. The Live Ship Traders, I really honestly think is going to end up being my favorite fantasy trilogy, favorite fantasy series, favorite fantasy author. So yeah, Ship of Magic for so many reasons. And we can talk about all of those reasons when you start reading it and you come chat with me about it on Discord. But for my horror subscribers, I would have to go with The Patience of a Dead Man trilogy by Michael Clark. This book blew me out of the water. It was everything I could ever ask for in a good haunted house scary story. I've only read the first 2 so far in the trilogy. I will be completing that trilogy in February. I'm going to be buddy reading the 3rd and final book with Brad Proctor. So I'll have to talk about the series as a whole at that point and determine the ranking for where it stands overall. So be looking to hear more on that. But if you like a good creepy haunted house, this is your book. For science fiction, I'm going to pick Recursion by Blake Crouch. It is a standalone. It's on the shorter side of things. It's very interesting. And while it is science fiction, I would actually personally classify it as a love story. Holy smokes, I'm not much of a romantic. I'm not romantic at all, actually. But gosh, this story touched me. I was talking about this book for weeks, I think even months after I finished it. It's one of my all-time favorites. It also had me falling in love with Blake Crouch as an author. For my sci-fi people, definitely would recommend Recursion. And then finally for manga, which I don't have a physical copy yet, but I would recommend One Piece by Eiichiro Oda. Oh wow, this series was amazing. The very first arc, which was volumes 1 through 23, I just don't think I will ever encounter another manga that will take its place. Just absolutely astonishing how fantastic of a story it is. It's all about loyalty and friendship and just making your dreams a reality. Next question. Did the challenges of 2020 hurt or help your ability to read? The challenges of 2020 had absolutely no bearing on my reading ability. So the next question is, what book are you currently reading and do you think you'll finish it before the year ends? Nina and Heather actually put these up like right before 2020 ended, so I didn't have the ability to get this filmed and up before then. So I will just think back in the time and tell you that at the time that they put this up, if I had recorded it that day, the book that I was reading was Promise of Blood by Brian McClellan, which is the first book in the Powder Mage trilogy, and I did not finish it by the end of the year. I actually finished it 2 days later. And then the final question is, did you finish your 2020 Goodreads challenge? I excelled that sucker. My challenge was 100 books and I exceeded it by 39, and then I went crazy and cranked it up to 200 for this year. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all of your support. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to see what is happening in my little corner of the world. All of my socials, including the Nerdy Narrative Discord, are in the description box down below. I would absolutely love to hear what you think about the video today. But for now, have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you soon.